most paranoid and ruthless railroad baron in American history, willingly handed over $1 million in cash and stock to a complete stranger. The man who took the fortune had never built a railroad, owned a company, or drawn a single weapon to get what he wanted. His only tool was an absolute, terrifying mastery of the human mind. His name was Lord Gordon. In the autumn of 1870, a ship from Scotland docked in the bustling, soot-choked harbour of New York City. The man who stepped off the gangway did not look like a traveller weary from a long Atlantic crossing. He carried himself with the quiet, unquestionable authority of old money. This was the dawn of the American Gilded Age. It was a chaotic, ruthless era defined by immense, newly minted wealth, but shadowed by a deep, collective insecurity. The American billionaires of the time possessed fortunes that rivaled ancient empires. They owned railroads that cut across the raw continent, steel mills that burned through the night, and banks that held the lifeblood of a rapidly expanding nation. Yet, despite their unimaginable capital, they lacked the one thing their money could not instantly print. They lacked pedigree. The men who built America had often come from nothing, their hands still calloused from the labor that built their empires. Because of this, they harbored a desperate, almost pathetic craving for European aristocratic validation. To these rough-hewn titans of industry, a genuine British lord was a creature of mythological status, a symbol of the refinement and history they desperately wished to buy. The mysterious man from Scotland understood this psychological hunger perfectly. He introduced himself to the American elite simply as Lord Gordon. He claimed to be a direct descendant of the ancient and noble kings of Scotland, a man whose family tree was rooted in the very bedrock of European history. He did not arrive asking for favors. He arrived with the overwhelming aura of a man who already owned the world. Psychologists refer to the phenomenon he exploited as the halo effect. It is a cognitive bias where our overall visual and superficial impression of a person dictates how we judge their fundamental character. If a man looks, sounds, and acts like a wealthy, honorable aristocrat, the human brain automatically short-circuits its critical thinking. It assumes he is honest. It assumes he is capable. Most dangerously, it assumes he is safe. Gordon weaponized this psychological blind spot with terrifying precision. His wardrobe was a calculated costume of immaculate, tailored suits cut from the finest European fabrics. His posture was rigidly perfect. His accent was a flawlessly refined, upper-class British drawl that commanded attention in any room without him ever needing to raise his voice. He understood that true wealth does not shout, it whispers. His performance in America was a masterclass in behavioral manipulation. A common street-level con artist arrives in a new city and immediately begins looking for a mark to extract money from. Gordon did the exact opposite. He acted as though he suffered from the exhausting burden of having too much capital to manage. After briefly surveying New York, he traveled west to Minnesota, a frontier state desperately hungry for development. There, he began throwing vast sums of actual cash at local investments, seemingly as an afterthought. He deposited tens of thousands of dollars into local banks purely to establish unquestionable financial credibility. He purchased sprawling tracts of land without haggling over the price. He stayed in the finest hotel suites, tipping the staff with extravagant gold coins that left them bowing in his wake. When he engaged in conversation with the local magnates, he never boasted. Instead, he casually dropped the names of his supposed royal relatives and European parliamentary connections, mentioning them as idly as one might mention the weather. He never asked anyone to believe him. He simply provided the visual and financial evidence and let the Americans draw their own conclusions. And they did exactly what he knew they would do. The local elite practically fell over themselves to be in his presence, desperate to associate with a true European nobleman. They offered him political favors, exclusive inside financial information, and their absolute blind trust. He had successfully manipulated an entire society without ever making a single demand. The stage was meticulously set. He had built the perfect aristocratic shell, Now he just needed the perfect victim. The victim he selected was not a naive provincial merchant or a careless heir. His name was Jay Gould. In the merciless hierarchy of 19th century American capitalism, Gould occupied a tier entirely his own. He was a slight, quiet man with dark, piercing eyes and a mind like a steel trap. He routinely dismantled competitors' empires, purchased New York judges as effortlessly as buying cigars, and trusted absolutely no one. The press denounced him as the dark genius of Wall Street. His rivals simply feared him. Gould was a brilliant, paranoid strategist who analyzed every human interaction as a calculated transaction, always searching for the hidden motive. Yet, even the most impenetrable paranoia harbors a blind spot. By the early 1870s, Gould was entrenched in a brutal, financially exhausting war for total control of the Erie Railroad. The infamous conflict, fought against established titans like Cornelius Vanderbilt, had severely drained Gould's liquidity and battered his public reputation. He was winning, but the victory was precarious. He did not merely need raw capital to secure his empire. He desperately needed an injection of unquestionable prestige. He needed an alliance with institutional weight that Wall Street could not easily attack or dismiss. That specific, silent desperation was the invisible crack in his otherwise flawless armor. When Lord Gordon finally permitted an introduction to Gould, the setup was a masterpiece of psychological inversion. Gordon did not arrive at Gould's office bearing a business proposal. He did not pitch an idea, and he certainly did not ask for capital. Instead, he framed the encounter as a rare, passing concession granted by a burdened aristocrat to a struggling colonial businessman. During their initial meetings, Gordon casually disclosed that he was not acting alone. He was merely the vanguard for a vast, secretive syndicate of European royalty. These silent monarchs and lords, he implied, were looking to quietly pour tens of millions of pounds sterling into the expanding American railroad infrastructure. They only required the right American operator to manage their ancient wealth. The fundamental dynamic of power shifted without Gould even realizing it. A billionaire accustomed to being ruthlessly pursued by desperate men was suddenly positioned as the one needing validation. Gordon executed the charade flawlessly. He appeared perpetually distracted, slightly bored by the scale of Gould's railroad empire, and openly reluctant to commit the European funds. He subtly hinted that other American tycoons were already vying for the royal syndicate's favor. He made Gould wait for scheduled meetings. He forced Gould to initiate the correspondence. He answered urgent inquiries with agonizing, aristocratic delay. Gordon understood a profound truth about highly intelligent, aggressive men. They only value what they must fight to obtain. By projecting total indifference, Gordon forced the most suspicious man in New York to abandon his defensive posture entirely. He did not try to sell Gould a lie. He made the paranoid genius actively chase the phantom, setting the trap perfectly for the kill. Weeks turned into months, and the promised European millions remained nothing but ink on forged paper. The grand influx of royal capital that was supposed to permanently secure the Erie Railroad never materialized. In the deafening silence of that waiting period, Jay Gould's natural, predatory paranoia slowly began to reassert itself. The psychological fog of the halo effect started to thin, replaced by a cold, calculating suspicion. Gould did what he had always done best. He weaponized his resources. He dispatched quiet inquiries through his vast network of telegraph operators, financial spies, and transatlantic contacts, seeking concrete confirmation of the elusive royal syndicate. The replies that echoed back across the ocean from London and Edinburgh were devastatingly consistent. There was no syndicate. The noble lineage was a complete fabrication. The intricate letters, with their heavy wax seals and aristocratic crests that Gordon had so casually displayed, were elaborate, flawless fakes. The Lord was a phantom, for a man of Gould's specific psychological makeup. The realization was catastrophic. It was not merely the loss of the money. To a titan of the American Gilded Age, $1 million in stock and cash was a painful but recoverable sum, a mere casualty of aggressive business warfare. The true, unforgivable injury was the absolute destruction of his ego. Gould, the undisputed dark genius of Wall Street, who routinely outmaneuvered entire governments and destroyed rival empires, had been led by a leash. He had been thoroughly, embarrassingly outsmarted by a man armed with nothing but a tailored suit and a fabricated accent. The realization that he had willingly handed over his fortune to a ghost was a humiliation that burned like acid. In a blinding fury, Gould unleashed his attorneys. He formally sued Gordon, demanding his immediate arrest and the return of the assets. In the spring of 1873, Lord Gordon was apprehended and brought before a New York Supreme Court judge. What followed was a spectacle that defied legal logic. The man who stood in the courtroom did not behave like a cornered thief or a desperate con artist. He arrived with absolute chilling composure. He treated the legal proceedings not as an indictment, but as a tedious, highly offensive insult to his noble station. He maintained his aristocratic charade with such unwavering conviction that he managed to gaslight the room all over again. Under cross-examination, Gordon did not break. He spoke softly, expressing profound aristocratic disappointment in Gould's lack of patience and his crude breach of a gentleman's trust. His performance was so unnervingly perfect, his indignation so flawlessly acted, that the attending press, the public, and even the presiding judge began to actively doubt Gould's accusations. Gordon's sheer audacity was intoxicating. Aided by the financial backing of Gould's many powerful enemies in New York, who were delighted to see the railroad baron humiliated, Gordon was easily granted bail. But the master manipulator was not delusional. Gordon was a realist who understood the mechanics of his own con. He knew that his psychological armor could only deflect the relentless machinery of the American legal system for a limited time. The illusion had an expiration date, and he knew Jay Gould would never stop hunting him. Before the courts could definitively strip away his false title, and the authorities could close the trap, Gordon quietly abandoned his luxurious New York suites. He moved swiftly north, slipping through the narrowing legal net. He crossed the international border, vanishing into the cold, remote frontier of Manitoba, Canada. He left behind a shattered illusion and a billionaire whose humiliated rage was about to break the boundaries of the law. Jay Gould was not a man who waited for the slow, grinding wheels of the justice system, especially when a fugitive had slipped beyond its jurisdiction. The public humiliation of being thoroughly outsmarted by a phantom aristocrat festered into a cold, consuming rage. If the law could not reach Lord Gordon across the Canadian border, Gould would simply purchase men who could. He circumvented the courts entirely, using his vast, nearly limitless wealth to fund a private, rogue military operation. It was an act of astonishing arrogance, the move of a billionaire who treated international borders as mere inconveniences to be bought or broken. In the summer of 1873, Gould assembled a highly specialized and deeply illegal strike team. He hired a contingent of hardened mercenaries, bounty hunters, and, remarkably, prominent American politicians from Minnesota who were loyal to his checkbook. Their orders were explicit, illegal, and highly lucrative. Cross the border into Manitoba, Canada. Locate the man calling himself Lord Gordon, grab him by brute force, and drag him back to United States soil to face the wrath of his victim. The team moved quietly north, tracking their target to the muddy outskirts of Fort Garry. They found him, physically subdued him, and bound him, preparing to rush their high-value captive back across the invisible line that separated two sovereign nations. But the execution of the plot unraveled with disastrous speed. Canadian authorities, tipped off to the sudden, chaotic appearance of armed Americans operating illegally within their territory, intercepted the kidnapping party before they could reach the safety of the Minnesota border. The American mercenaries and politicians were stripped of their weapons, arrested on the spot, and thrown into a Canadian jail without bail. Gordon, the architect of the entire crisis, was simply brushed off and released back into the comfortable custody of Canadian officials. Gould's private strike force had not only failed to retrieve the stolen money, but they had also committed a severe international felony in plain sight. What began as a personal vendetta over a wounded ego rapidly mutated into an unprecedented diplomatic nightmare. The United States government, heavily pressured by Gould's immense political influence and the furious families of the jailed politicians, formally demanded the immediate release of the American kidnappers. Canada, deeply outraged by the blatant, armed violation of its national sovereignty by a billionaire's private army, absolutely refused. The rhetoric on both sides of the border turned vicious. The situation escalated far beyond a legal dispute regarding a stolen $1 million. The governor of Minnesota, furious that prominent citizens of his state were locked in foreign cells, publicly threatened to call up the state militia. He declared his intention to arm thousands of men and physically invade Canada to retrieve the prisoners by force. The situation had spiraled completely out of control. Telegraph wires between Washington, London, and Ottawa burned with diplomatic ultimatums. Newspapers across the American Midwest fanned the flames of nationalism, calling for immediate military action over a border dispute engineered by a furious, humiliated railroad tycoon. It was a surreal, terrifying moment in North American history. A single con artist, armed with nothing but forged letters, a fake accent, and an absolute predatory mastery of human greed, had successfully manipulated his way into the highest echelons of power and brought two nations to the absolute brink of armed conflict. The manipulator was now watching a war brew from his hotel window. By the high summer of August 1874, the fierce diplomatic fires that had nearly ignited a violent border war finally began to burn out. The frantic telegrams ceased. The threats of an armed militia invasion from Minnesota were quietly walked back in the bureaucratic halls of Washington. Through tense back-channel negotiations and the slow, inevitable pressure of international law, the Canadian authorities reached a definitive agreement with the United States. They would formally deport the man known as Lord Gordon. He was to be handed over to American marshals at the border, placed on a southbound train, and thrown directly to the mercy of Jay Gould and a humiliated waiting legal system. But Gordon's final days in the Canadian frontier were not spent languishing in a cold, iron-barred cell. True to the powerful psychological spell he had cast over everyone he encountered, his captors treated him less like an international fugitive and more like an esteemed, temporarily inconvenienced dignitary. He was kept under a loose, almost respectful house arrest in a highly comfortable, well-furnished room at a respectable boarding house in Headingley, Manitoba. He was permitted to walk the grounds. He ate exceptionally well. His suits remained immaculate. Even with the absolute certainty of his impending extradition looming over him, he never once broke character. He remained the calm, slightly melancholic European aristocrat, a noble victim wronged by the crude, vindictive mechanisms of the New World. On August 1st, the very eve of his scheduled deportation, Gordon orchestrated his final, most surreal act of psychological theatre. He did not attempt a desperate midnight escape into the unforgiving Canadian wilderness. He did not beg for clemency. Instead, he hosted a lavish farewell party right there in his quarters. He used the last of his remaining funds to purchase expensive, highly thoughtful gifts for his Canadian friends, the local magistrates, and even the very guards who were legally bound to hand him over the next morning. He ordered the finest food available in the territory. He poured expensive wine. He offered elegant, articulate toasts to his host's health and hospitality. It was a bizarre, intoxicating display. He played the gracious, immensely wealthy lord perfectly, holding court in a room full of men who were entirely captivated by the very illusion they were supposed to be dismantling. The captors found themselves thanking their prisoner. Late in the evening, the wine was finally finished. The polite, oddly emotional farewells were exchanged at the door. The guests, charmed and deeply conflicted by the man they were sending to his doom, stepped out into the cool Manitoba night. Gordon was left alone, with his guards posted quietly in the hall outside. He retired to his bedroom. He did not pack a suitcase for the morning journey. He did not write a sprawling confession to explain the stolen millions, the intricately forged royal seals, or the international military crisis he had casually engineered. He did not leave a single note revealing his true name or the genuine history of the man beneath the tailored suits. He simply stepped into the quiet shadows of the room, raised a loaded pistol to his head, and pulled the trigger. The sudden, violent crack of the gunshot shattered the quiet stillness of the boarding house. When the guards rushed through the door, they found him dead on the floor. He had made his final, cold calculation. He had chosen to die on his own terms, bleeding out as an enigmatic European lord, rather than be dragged back across the border in iron chains to face the billionaire whose reality he had so thoroughly dismantled. The performance was over. Jay Gould eventually recovered a significant portion of his lost fortune. Through years of relentless litigation, his armies of attorneys slowly clawed back the eerie railroad stock certificates and the cash from various frozen accounts. But for a man of Gould's specific paranoid constitution, the financial restitution was meaningless. The true damage was already done, and it was entirely irreparable. The public spectacle of the New York courtrooms, the international embarrassment of the botched mercenary kidnapping, and the sheer, staggering audacity of the fraud left a permanent, humiliating scar on his legacy. The ruthless baron who had broken monopolies, purchased legislatures, and ruined countless competitors was forever cemented in the public memory as the untouchable genius who had been effortlessly outsmarted by a ghost. When the Canadian authorities buried the body of the man who shot himself in that Headingley boarding house, they buried an absolute cipher. To this day, more than a century and a half later, historians, detectives, and genealogists have never discovered Lord Gordon's real name. They do not know what country he was truly born in, what his original profession was, or what dark, driving compulsion led him across the Atlantic to orchestrate one of the most audacious deceptions in human history. His luggage contained no diaries. His pockets held no genuine letters from home. Every document was a forgery. Every anecdote was a calculated lie. The man himself was an empty vessel, constructed entirely out of the expectations, the snobbery, and the blind greed of the people he sought to exploit. The tragedy of this Gilded Age con is not a story about the mechanics of 19th century finance. It is a terrifying study of the profound fragility of the human mind. When we think of violence, we instinctively picture physical force, a weapon drawn, a blow struck, a visible wound. But physical violence leaves bruises that eventually fade. Financial theft, no matter how vast the sum, involves numbers on a ledger that can be recalculated, earned back, and recovered. Psychological manipulation operates on an entirely different, far more devastating level. The calculated, deliberate gaslighting of a victim, the weaponization of their own deep-seated insecurities, and the systematic dismantling of their reality and ego leaves a ruin that is often permanent. Gordon did not merely rob Jay Gould. He reached into the mind of a paranoid mastermind, rearranged the architecture of his reality, and left him fundamentally doubting his own sanity. The greatest con in the history of the American frontier was not the act of stealing $1 million. A common criminal with a revolver could attempt to rob a bank vault. The true, chilling masterpiece of the man who called himself Lord Gordon was making one of the most powerful, cynical, and ruthless men in the world look him in the eye and willingly hand that fortune over. He proved, once and for all, that the most impenetrable vaults are not constructed of iron and steel. They are made of human perception. And then, with a single pull of a trigger in a quiet room at the edge of the world, he took the secret of how to pick that lock to the grave.